On this episode of MRI Physics Explained, the time has arrived. We are finally going to discuss our first full pulse sequence diagram, the tried and true spin echo sequence, the one you've all probably encountered in some form on your MRI physics journey, and which lays the basis for many of the modern MRI pulse sequences used today. So come enjoy the fruits of all that hard labor you've put in so far on this next episode of MRI Physics Explained. Welcome back everyone, and hello to all of our new viewers. If you like these lectures, please like and comment. Follow us on social media for additional content and previews, links in the description below, and click that subscribe button. Also, check out our new membership section by hitting that join button next to the subscribe button below. Here you can find exclusive emojis made by yours truly, and find other ways to support the channel. We appreciate all your support, and that's what keeps this channel going. So if you watched the last lecture, we began our discussion on pulse sequence diagrams by showing that if we apply our RF pulse and slice select gradient at the same time, here at time 0, we generate our first signal that quickly dies out that we call our FID, or free induction decay. And we run into this problem that we can only apply one of our two localization gradients, the frequency encoding and phase encoding gradients, on this free induction decay. We showed in the phase encoding lecture that issues arise when we try to apply both of them at the same time. So we denote the gradient we vary throughout the image capturing process, the phase encoding gradient, shown here by these green boxes, as the gradient we apply to our free induction decay. We'll explain what these boxes mean later in the lecture. So that brings us to the topic of the previous lecture on the echo. We need to make the signal re-emerge so we can apply our second localization gradient, the frequency encoding gradient, and we do this by applying a second RF pulse at some time point after our free induction decay has dissipated. Link to that lecture is above, and I highly suggest you watch it before continuing on with these pulse sequence lectures. So by applying the second RF pulse, also applying our slice select gradient at the same time to make sure that RF energy is being deposited into our slice of interest, we can make this signal re-emerge as an echo onto which we apply our frequency encoding gradient on, and we designate the peak of this echo as our TE, or time of echo. Now is where we need to start thinking about this process in more complex terms than the simplified concepts shown in the basic lectures. So my question for you is, do you think this is enough? Do we have enough here to create a picture of the body that you'd want to bet your health on? How strong should this first pulse be? How strong should the second pulse be? And at what time should we apply it? Should we apply it here? Or here? Does it even matter? Let's quickly return to the visual from the previous lecture and examine this further. Here we have all of our little magnets aligned with the z-axis / B0 magnetic field to start. We apply our first RF pulse, in this case let's pick 90 degrees, and it flips the net magnetizations from each voxel into the XY plane, perfectly aligned with the plane since we chose 90 degrees and with their overall orientation shown by the white arrow. And then they will precess, generating our free induction decay signal as they do so, but getting more and more out of phase with each other due to T2 effects, while slowly relaxing back towards the z-axis. Eventually, the dephasing becomes so great our net magnetizations are lost and our signal disappears. And now we need to decide when we want to apply this next RF pulse, and at what strength. Notice that if we apply the second RF pulse here, the overall orientation of the spins is this far from the XY plane. But if we wait just a little bit longer, they will relax back towards the z-axis even more, and our angle with the XY plane will increase as well. So if we want to create this large of a flip angle on our second pulse, that second pulse will need to be stronger the longer we wait to apply it. Let's not get lost in the minutia here, but I want you to realize that it actually really does matter what the strength of our initial pulse is, as well as the second pulse and the time at which we apply it. This is a dynamic system constantly moving with time, and if we're not careful with how we choose our parameters, say we choose a 90-degree initial pulse and 100-degree second pulse applied here, we may generate a very weak echo, or even none at all. And we haven't even started talking about what our image quality will be. Let's say we are able to generate a sufficient echo. It doesn't guarantee we'll get a pretty picture. In fact, it may look something like this. Not so great, right? And that's because there's a major problem we've been avoiding up to this point. So far, we've assumed that we have a perfectly uniform magnetic field, that this voxel sees B0 at baseline, as do all the rest. And so all of these spins precess at the same rate once knocked into the XY plane, and the only reason that they start to dephase with some spinning faster or slower than the others is solely due to T2 effects, or local interactions between these spins. And unfortunately, we have two problems. No matter how hard we try, we can't produce a perfectly uniform external magnetic field. It's imperfect or inhomogeneous, particularly around the periphery. If we're looking at the MRI machine from the side with our patient lying inside the machine as shown, we've pretended so far that these B0 magnetic field lines are perfectly spaced across the bore of the machine. But in reality, they aren't uniform or perfectly spaced. They're more uniform in the center, creating a more homogeneous field there, and as you get further and further away, they become less uniform. What this means for our signal and imaging is that there are more than just T2 effects that will cause dephasing. Remember that what dictates the precession rate of the protons and net magnetization is the Larmor frequency, which solely depends on the magnetic field the protons are seeing. So right from the start, we're at a disadvantage. Our inability to create a perfectly uniform magnetic field creates differences in precession rates throughout our slice, and leads to increased dephasing and loss of signal. These can be thought of as external or extrinsic effects, which more simply means we have a non-uniform external magnetic field shown here. If this is leading to issues in image quality, we can sometimes improve the uniformity of the field by what we call shimming the magnet, a term some of you may have heard before. This improves field uniformity as shown here. But if we have extrinsic effects, then we also must have intrinsic effects, right? We're not imaging a pure substance that uniformly interacts with the magnetic field, such as this bottle of water. We're imaging a very complex structure made of many different molecules, some of which are diamagnetic, which weakly interact with our external magnetic field, and others that are paramagnetic or strongly interact with the external magnetic field, such as the metal hardware here in the skull, and also things such as blood or calcium. And notice what it does to our picture. We can barely see the brain in these regions because it leads to rapid dephasing, degrading our signal and distorting our image. So these intrinsic effects that are secondary to paramagnetic molecules such as certain forms of iron, oxygen, and calcium within our slice, and which augment the local magnetic field have a special name, T2 star effects. And this terminology is so confusing we tackled this subject in our first Q&A video. Link above if you want more details. So if we can't figure out a way to minimize these intrinsic effects, an MRI machine would be far less useful, don't you think? How do we account for this? Well, remember all the time we spent in the last lecture talking about rephasing, and how by flipping these spins into the other half of the XY plane, we can reverse the direction of spin relative to the receiver coil and recover some of the dephasing that has occurred. Notice that it doesn't really depend on the source of the dephasing, whether it be T2 effects or intrinsic T2 star effects. It really just relies on the fact that for some reason, these spins are precessing at different rates relative to one another. And it just so happens with careful selection of our pulses and timing, we can account for some of these intrinsic T2 star effects caused by paramagnetic molecules within our slice. Specifically, If we choose our initial pulse to be 90 degrees and our second pulse to be 180 degrees, importantly applied at a time of 1/2 TE, we can reverse the dephasing these intrinsic magnetic field alterations cause, minimize their effect on our picture, and improve the diagnostic quality of the image shown here. Much better, right? So this 90-degree initial pulse and 180-degree rephasing pulse applied at a time of 1/2 TE constitutes this optimal combination of pulses and timing to create what we call our standard spin echo sequence. This, my friends, was a huge breakthrough when developing MR imaging, and as you see, turns images that would otherwise be unreadable into ones you bet your health and life on. This is the granddaddy MRI sequence. Know it for boards, and on a side note, I don't think it's a coincidence that there's some symmetry to this process, having seen what's going on with the spins up until this point. One more important thing to note that exams love to test you on. We have two types of these intrinsic effects, both random and non-random, and as you can guess, we can only regain the dephasing caused by non-random T2 star intrinsic effects with this rephasing pulse technique. So then how do we create a picture? How many times do we need to run this sequence to get all the data we need? Well, classically, as showed in the phase encoding lecture, we need to apply a different phase encoding gradient for each row of voxels we have in the phase encoding direction. And take this with a grain of salt. This is what you'll be tested on, but modern day MRI is a little more complicated. So for our example, we have multiple boxes representing our phase encoding gradient, with each box representing a different gradient strength. Going through the sequence, in order to build a picture, we would need to apply our slice select gradient and 90-degree pulse. This generates our free induction decay signal, on which we apply one of these phase encoding gradients. At 1/2 TE, we apply our 180-degree rephasing pulse. Our echo emerges and we apply our frequency encoding gradient during the echo while recording the signal. And then we have to wait. Our spins are dephased, our net magnetization's gone, and we have to wait for these to realign and rebuild along our B0 z-axis so we can restart the process. Starting with another 90-degree pulse. A couple things to point out here. This time point from the beginning of our sequence to the next iteration is called our TR, or time to repetition. We are restarting the cycle here with this 90-degree pulse, creating our next free induction decay signal, and although we draw it a second time on the diagram, we're really just saying we go back to the start. Apply our slice select gradient and 90-degree initial RF pulse. This produces our free induction decay, but now we have to apply a different phase encoding gradient, shown here by the second box now being green. Previously it was the first. And then again, at time equals 1/2 TE, we apply our 180-degree rephasing pulse, generating our echo, on which we apply our frequency encoding gradient and record the signal. We again have to wait for the spins to realign with B0 and the z-axis, rebuilding our net magnetizations, before starting the process all over again for a third cycle. Applying our slice select gradient and 90-degree RF pulse, generating our free induction decay signal, and once again applying a different phase encoding gradient, then our 180-degree rephasing pulse at 1/2 TE, generating our echo, on which we apply our frequency encoding gradient and record the signal. And again, we wait until this time point TR, at which our net magnetizations have rebuilt, before starting the process for a fourth cycle. And finally, a fifth cycle. So in this example, we've performed the cycle 5 times with 5 unique phase encoding gradients. And if this was the picture we are trying to build, we get a picture 5 rows across in the phase encoding direction as classically taught. But remember, a normal picture is more like this: 128 by 256 voxels. There's even more boxes than shown, but it wouldn't let me draw them any smaller. And this would equate to 256 rows in the phase encoding direction and 128 columns in the frequency encoding direction. So by now you're probably asking, Do we really need to repeat the cycle 256 times to generate a picture of one slice of the body? How long will that take? Aha, that's a good question, and we might as well tackle it now. If one full cycle here takes time TR to perform, we know our repetition time TR will play a role in imaging time. And one might also ask, how many cycles do we need to perform? Well, we just showed that depends on the number of phase encoding steps we need to perform for the desired picture resolution. So at a minimum, imaging time will be proportional to the number of phase encoding steps we need times the length of time it takes to perform one cycle, the time of repetition or TR. But this is assuming just one application of each phase encoding gradient is enough to produce a quality image, and unfortunately sometimes it's not. So we have an additional term here, NEX. The number of excitations, meaning if it's 2, we'll repeat all the phase encoding steps twice to improve our signal-to-noise ratio, which makes our picture look better. So going back to our trusty spin echo sequence, do we really need to repeat the cycle 256 times? How long is this all going to take? Too long. For any of you who've worked or are working in the MRI department of a hospital, you know there's a never-ending quest to shorten imaging time because there are more people that need MRIs than machines and time slots available, and ultimately, time equals money. These are multi-million-dollar machines with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of service contracts, and our hospital CEOs need their private jets, so there's immense pressure to shorten imaging time as much as possible and scan as many people per day as their poor protons will allow them to do so. So how do we decrease imaging time considering these 3 variables? Well, remember that the axes we choose for the frequency encoding and phase encoding directions are arbitrary. So if we have a rectangular body part like the head, would we want to set the phase encoding direction along the long side of the image and do double the phase encoding steps for fun, grounding our CEO's private jet for the day? Of course not. A hospital CEO wouldn't be a hospital CEO without their private jet. So let's simply switch the frequency encoding and phase encoding axes, and voila, we cut our phase encoding steps in half. And by halving our phase encoding steps, we halve our imaging time. Can we do anything else? Assuming for now this classically taught concept of phase encoding where we can't further decrease the number of phase encoding steps, by the way, this is wrong, but for exams, just pretend like it's the case. What other variables in this equation can we change? Are we limited to this free induction decay, echo, free induction decay, echo pattern defining our spin echo sequence? On the next episode of MRI Physics Explained, we're going to build off the foundation we laid in this lecture and see if we can further improve the spin echo pulse sequence to decrease imaging time and keep our hospital CEOs in their private jets. As always, thanks for your support. If you really want to keep these videos going, consider becoming a member or donate using the links below. Until next time, this is Dr. TE signing off.